Hey everyone, it's Brian with Retired at 40. It's been a real long time since I've done an update video on the van, and today is the perfect opportunity. We're about 99% done, and it's time for some refrigeration. So today we're gonna figure out what refrigeration I chose. I'm gonna unbox this thing, I'm gonna do a quick review of it, and then I'm gonna test to see how much power consumption this takes, both with AC power and with DC power. The DC battery, I'm gonna see how long it will take to drain a fully charged 12-volt battery. So what I ended up with was not technically a fridge at all. It was actually an electric cooler, and it's made by Newair. This is the portable 80-quart version. Model number is NPR080GA00. Not a real easy one to remember, but one reason that I really liked this cooler is it will run on AC or DC, which I have access to both in my van. It's also dual zone, so you can make one side a refrigerator, you can make the other side a freezer. Both sides have variable temperature that you can change, so if you want to make it both sides a freezer, you can. If you want to make it both sides a refrigerator, you can, or if you just want different temperatures on both sides. But let's go ahead and get this thing unboxed and get going on this review. One of the reasons I really liked this model of cooler is Newair has been around for a long time. They make wine refrigerators, they make air conditioners, they make cigar humidors. So a couple things I like right off the bat. I love the casters on here. It's really nice to have that, especially for someone who's looking for something portable. And a cooler of this size, if you're gonna have this thing full of food and beer or soda, whatever, it's gonna be pretty hefty, and it's nice to be able to tote this thing around. Second, it's got this nice extension handle that comes out. That's also pretty nice to see. It has an LG compressor on it. It's not like some unknown compressor company. LG obviously makes very quality items. And then I also noticed while I was over here, this has an inlet for solar, so we're gonna have to come back to that. That seems like a pretty cool function. This is also pretty interesting. This is something that you normally wouldn't see. $26 yearly energy cost. So 20 to 25 bucks to run this thing for an entire year. So my van is pretty small in comparison to other vans, and I only have a limited amount of space. So the measurements of this are going to be pretty crucial for me. So let's get some real world measurements on this. So the very longest part of this is just under 37.5. The widest part of this is just about 21 inches, maybe a little bit less. And then at the very tallest, it's 18 inches on the dot. So the company's specs are pretty right on, but let's get into this thing. Inside we've got our power cords for AC and for DC, and then just a little bit of info on how to work it. This is the larger side of the compartment. This would be your compressor side, which is going to be a little bit smaller. This would be ideal for drinks. They're just about the right height for soda and beer, things like that. And then you have a little bit of extra room down on the side as well. And just after being around this thing for a couple minutes, I really like the construction of it. It seems like it's really well made. Everything fits together nice. The lids close nice. And I noticed that you can actually flip these lids around. So if you had a specific situation where this needed to be changed out, you can just, it's real quick. So next I want to see what kind of power this thing pulls. So I've got a kilowatt meter here. You can see that it's zeroed out right now. So we're just going to turn the power button on, which is actually really nice that you can turn this completely off if you were trying to conserve energy. Now that we have this fired up, let's get the decibel meter going and we'll see how loud or how quiet this is. And it was also right on with the noise emission. It says less than 45 decibels. It's almost so quiet that it's not noticeable. It really just sounds like a fan, like a miniature fan that you would plug in, something that we take with us in the van anyway. So now you can see it's pulling about 36 watts, which is really, really low. If you compare that with a little dorm fridge or like a little beer fridge, the average use of one of those. So I'm going to take the temperature down to freezing in here, and what I really want to see is if this can make ice from water. So I've got some ice cube trays filled up. We'll drop them in here, drop the temperature down, and I'll check with you in a second. All right, it's been about 24 hours, and it looks like we've got ice. Look at that, we've got ice. And and we've only used 0.62 kilowatt hours. So now that this thing's good and cold, let's plug it into the 12 volt system in the van and see how long it'll run on a full battery. Okay, so we're running 100% on 12 volt now. I've disconnected my solar panel to 2 zones. One is at 42 degrees, one is at 27 degrees. I've switched this to eco mode, which should be the most energy conserving. And it's noon on a Monday right now. In my ideal situation is I'm hoping that this will go for at least 24 hours on the battery. This does have a shut off that will not let you drain your battery past the point where it's gonna damage the battery, which is really nice to have. But I have been thinking about this cooler running just off of solar. And theoretically, if you had this hooked into a battery or some sort of power storage as well as solar, you could keep this running 24/7 because the amount of wattage that this pulls is pretty minimal. So even a 100-watt solar panel, I would think, would be able to maintain the battery during the day. And then hopefully the battery would have enough power to run this cooler through the nighttime. Another function that I didn't mention earlier, this does have a USB port on the side too, so you can run your phone, charge devices, Bluetooth speakers, stuff like that. One last thing I wanted to mention is I did have this cooled down. I had it plugged into the wall, so it was actually at temperature before I plugged it into the 12 volt system, which is always going to be your best bet as far as conserving your battery. You want this to be cooled down. That's what's going to take the longest and take the most battery power, is actually getting the cooler cold. Maintaining it is going to take a lot less. Alright, so it's about 9 o'clock at night, and our battery's still at 12.7 volts. I checked on it a second ago and it was down to 12 volts, but the fan was kicking on, so when that fan kicks on, it does drop down the voltage in there, but once it shuts off again, then voltage pops right back up. It really has not even moved after 9 hours of using it, so that kind of gives me hope that if you incorporate a solar panel with this thing, you could just use it continuously. This thing is really efficient, but I'm really excited to see what it's at tomorrow morning. So I'll catch you then. So it's now 6 a.m. The cooler is still at 12.7 volts and we're well on our way to our 24-hour mark, which is what I was shooting for. So I'll check back in with you at noon today. All right, our cooler's been running for 25 hours now. After 25 hours, I can't believe this thing is not pulling more power than it is. So my original plan was to make sure that this went for 24 hours, but I think at this point, I'm just gonna let it go. I'm just gonna see how long it will go on the battery above and beyond 24 hours. And I just wanna clarify too, that battery is not hooked to my car. That is just a stationary battery, so it's not getting recharged when my car starts. That is a separate battery bank that's only charged by my solar panel. The solar panel is disconnected. Still going strong after 48 hours. So after 48 hours, this thing is still going strong, but this thing would have no problem going for a weekend trip or maybe even a long holiday. I also want to mention that I've only opened the cooler a couple times since I started this whole thing, and that's going to affect your results pretty greatly, I would imagine. Alright, well this is getting crazy. This is day 3 now. We're still at 12.4 volts. This thing is just continues to amaze me. And I did find something else out that's kind of interesting. It does give you the choice to go into this low, medium, or high battery saving mode. And basically that's your battery cutoff voltage. The low end being 8.4 volts and the high end being 11.1 volts. It basically just allows enough voltage for if you had this plugged into your car or something, you're using your car battery, that it's not going to drain your entire battery to the point where your car won't start. But since we started this thing has only dropped down about 0.5 or 0.6 volts in 3 days. So I've got to say that when I first got this, I just thought it was just a regular old cooler. It has a lot better features than some of the other coolers and the quality is a lot better, but the longer I have it, the more I really like this thing, and so it's really got me intrigued on a couple of things. So after this got past the 48-hour mark, I really started questioning, well, maybe I should have food in there. So I researched to see if the efficiency of a cooler or a refrigerator changes with or without food in it, and what I came up with is it's very, very minimal, if at all. So I'm just gonna let this thing continue to run until I get to about 11.1 volts because I don't really want to drop my battery down below that. The other thing that's that's got me really intrigued is this solar port right here. So I actually reached out to the company, and the company said that this is actually an upgrade. You can get a solar panel that plugs directly into the cooler. You can also get a detachable battery pack that can run this cooler for extended periods of time. So depending what your situation is and what you're going to use this cooler for, that might be something to consider purchasing with the cooler. Another thing that I noticed while I was looking down here is there is a compartment right here that you can store your extra cords in. They will actually just go in there, and then you can put your, and it'll hold your extra cord in there for you. I think this is done. It's doing some kind of wonky stuff. I'm not sure if this is what it does when the battery is cut off, but you can see it's going from 0 to 11.9 volts, then to 12.3 volts. So I brought it back in and I plugged it into the wall, and it looks like that was the case. When the battery cutoff happens, it actually just beeps, and then the screen kind of flashes back and forth. But we did end up with 77 hours of runtime, which I still cannot believe it lasted that long. And if you wanted that cutoff to go to an even lower voltage, or if you were on a 24 volt system, it would go for a very long time. So I want to kind of leave you with my final thoughts. Judging by this video and my reactions through the video, I'm guessing you already know what I'm going to say. Really excited about this thing. It gets a thumbs up for me. I'm going to put this to use right away, and it's kind of the final piece to the puzzle of my van build. In the meantime, this is Retired at 40. Remember to live life simple, and we'll catch you next week.